Hey everybody, and welcome to another 10 games ranked video. So every now and then, as soon as I play 10 new to me games, then I release a video like this ranking these games from my least favourite up to my most favourite. So as usual, I have a big diverse range of games here, old and new, light and heavy, and everything in between. But before I get started on these 10 games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here. And if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get on with the games. At number 10, I have Castle Panic, which I believe was one of the pioneers of the cooperative genre. In this one, of course, you are working together by managing this hand of cards to fight off these different fantasy threats who are attacking a castle or a tower in the center of the board. Every round, these different orcs and goblins and bosses will slowly encroach, and you're playing these cards to try and repel them. You're using archer cards or knight cards, depending on the range they are away from that central tower. I can see what they're trying to do here. It definitely feels like a paint by numbers co-op game, and definitely a nice introduction to the idea of working together. But for me, the choices were fairly obvious. You're just going to play as many cards as you can. If you want to swap a card with your opponent, you can do, bearing in mind that they might be within range when it comes to their turn. So you're trying to utilize those cards to the best of their ability and not waste them. But I found it pretty lucky and random. You could just so happen to draw the wrong cards or the right cards. Things would happen that you couldn't really plan for. And to be honest, yeah, the decision space was lacking for me, and it was just kind of out of your hands how it was going to play out. So that is Castle Panic at number 10. At number 9, I have Chosen, which I believe I'm pronouncing correctly. This is a small box card game that only takes 10 to 20 minutes to play, and it's one of those games where you have a different number of cards depending on the different suits in the game. So there's like 2 2s, there's 3 3s, 4 4s, etc. You're trying to have the majority of those cards at the end of the game to get those points, but in this one, all those cards have different abilities, which will let you kind of steal cards off each other, gain different ways of getting points, attacking cards, etc. Now, I tend to like these quick little games that use cards in a clever way. In this one, I thought there was a little bit too much front loading and trying to remember what everything did. To be completely transparent, I have only played this one once, so this is definitely a first impressions or some first impression comments that I'm giving here. But I must admit, I wasn't blown away with it. It was pretty much like I felt like I'd seen it before, and I'd seen some more refined versions of games like this. So it felt like one of those games that have just come and gone. This is nearly 10 years old now. Nobody's really talking about it, and I can see why. So that is Chosen at number 9. At number 8, I have If Wishes Were Fishes. Now this is a kind of airy majority game with a little pinch of an economic kind of simulation going on here, as you are trying to collect these fish cards and sell them when they're at their most expensive, or when they're worth the most. And you can do that by drafting the cards, not only for the fish types themselves, but also for their dream ability or their wish ability, which will let you manipulate the board state by moving these kind of meeples around this rondelle, which will change, increase or decrease the values of the existing fish there. And different things like that. The way you're drafting cards is fairly interesting. You can using that incentive building mechanism where the further or the more cards you want to skip over, you have to leave these worms on them, and the worms are another way of getting points, and of course will give the player collecting those cards you've passed over more of those at their disposal, which means they can in the future get cards that they want. So I do like that kind of passing around economy of the different worms and trying to cash in the cards when they're worth the most and strike when the iron is hot. I also do like the fact that these, you cannot keep spamming the same type of fish, because there is a limited opportunity to sell each type of fish before the kind of market is closed, I suppose. Yes, you can keep getting the points for doing that, or the money, but you'll start to kind of put the things that you've bid on onto this kind of separate pool, which can give you negative points if you have the most there. So I thought it was okay, and maybe I'm being a little bit harsh by rating it down here, in 8th spot. I'll probably put it about a 4 or a 5 out of 10 at the moment, and I might be lowballing that, but it's another game that I've only played once. I was maybe expecting a little bit more from it, but now I know what the game is all about. Maybe I'll enjoy it more on subsequent plays. But that is If Wishes Were Fishes at number 8. At number 7, I have What Came First. So this is a mass market party game where you are wagering on your own knowledge. So you are going to get given 2 different items or things from history, and you have to guess which one was invented first. So for example, I think one of the questions is what came first, the surfboard or the bikini? And then you're putting either 1, 2 or 3 of these poker chips on there to see how well you do. If you're wrong, you'll go back that many spots. If you're correct, you'll go forward that many spots. Then it's going to be a race to get to a certain amount of points. That's the game in a nutshell. I tend to like these very accessible games that you can play with anybody. And this is one of those games that I'll never really reject playing. I'm happy to play this anytime. It's pretty quick. And there's even some interesting little facts and some trivia that you can learn along the way. So if you like party games, don't overlook this one. And you want to learn something and have that little bit of spice when it comes to wagering on how much you know. Now this is quite a good option. So that is what came first. At number 6, I have Bits, which is another simple puzzly style game as you're placing these kind of domino tiles onto your personal player boards, which are slanted, meaning that when you put them down there, they'll slide to the bottom, almost like a game of Tetris. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to position these different tiles to adhere to these different public objectives. So some might say for every block of 4 of the same colour you have, you'll get a point. Or if you have a particular shape, you'll get 2 points. And every round a new objective will come available to you, but the old ones will stay in play, meaning that you have different options you can go for. It's pretty quick, it's simple, it's straightforward, but I have to admit this game is terribly frustrating. Not necessarily in a bad way, because I do enjoy this one, but it seems no matter what you do, you're waiting for one tile to come out, otherwise your plans are ruined, and then the one tile you don't need will come out and everything is gone to muck. But this game is short enough and simple enough to roll with the punches and for that to be acceptable. But I tend to like these kind of simple, straightforward, puzzly games. The book shape in this one's a little bit awkward, which is quite annoying as well. But the game itself is fine. I do quite enjoy it and it's very pleasant. So that is Bits at number 6. At number 5, I have Circadians First Light. So this is a dice-driven Euro. As you are building up a bit of an engine by collecting these different tiles, you're travelling around this map, and by using dice, and a very cool mechanism actually, where the pip value will determine the direction you're going, and that'll also kind of improve or decrease the resources you're getting. You are trying to complete these public objectives and being the first to do that. You are completing your own personal cards and getting benefits that way. So it really is a lot of contract fulfillment and resource management going on here. Now, these dice-driven Euros, they are quite saturated at the moment. There are a lot of them out there, and to be honest, I have played a lot of them because it's one of my favourite types of games. Now, this one is a solid one. I can definitely see why it's quite well regarded. And there's some good fun things going on here, particularly that travel mechanism. But for me, it didn't quite hit the highs of a lot of the great ones out there. The ones from Board and Dice, the Marco Polos, that kind of thing. This one isn't quite there for me, despite being nothing overtly wrong with it. So I would play this one some more, but I'm not really salivating to do a deep dive into it because it's not quite as good as those other ones. But still a solid game. That is Circadians First Light. At number 4, I have Iki. Iki is a bit of a cult favourite really with a lot of Eurogamers. So it's a kind of a rondel game as you're travelling around visiting these different spots to collect resources, but you also are visiting these different characters that not only yourself are putting down but the other players are as well. And if you use your own character, you can just use it, but if you use someone else's character, you'll improve their experience, which will increase their income when it comes to certain points in the game. So it's quite a nice little conundrum there. We're thinking, I really want to use that character, but it's also going to help my opponent. So an interesting level of interaction. You are trying to increase your ability to fight off these fires, which will strike every now and then and can potentially cause you to, or force you to discard the characters you've invested in. Collecting different tokens for set collection bonuses, all these standard Euro things, but I do love this initiative system as before you even move on the rondel, you have to put another meeple down on this track here, which determines whether you're going to move 1, 2, 3 or 4 spaces around the rondel. And that really does play a big part because it's going to determine the initiative order as well. So if you move fewer spaces, it means you're actually going to go first, which can be important because you will be, you'll be disaligned with the other players or misaligned with the other players. So even though you're going for different distances, you might end up on the same space. So it might mean you want to go fewer steps, therefore you can take the better actions before your opponents get there. And lots of different ways to get points here. Definitely, a buffet of options. Lots of paths to victory. And it's a very pleasant game. So this one was kind of a quintessential near miss for me. And I say near miss is in terms of I did enjoy it highly, but it's just kind of missed out on a ranking spot for me. You know, I rate this probably about a 6.5, maybe even a 6.75 out of 10 when I tend to rank games from a 7+. So yeah, a solid Euro. It plays pretty quickly. It definitely doesn't take terribly long, but I do think that in terms of the round structure, it's maybe 2 or 3 rounds too long. But hey, that's a nitpick there. And the game itself, again, is one of those, there's nothing overtly wrong with it. But I've played my games with it. I feel like I've got a good impression of it. I could recommend it quite confidently to a lot of people, but not one that I'm really itching to keep on my own collection because I have more that I enjoy of this kind of weight category. But that is Iki. I don't want it to sound negative because it's a very good game. Okay, so let's get into the recommendations here. So we have 3 games we're recommending on this episode, and the first of which, at number 3, is the oldest game on the entire list here. This is Manhattan by Andreas Seyfarth. Now that name might sound familiar to you because he is actually the designer of Puerto Rico. But this game is completely different to a game like Puerto Rico. It's much more family friendly, and it's a simplistic area control, area majority game, and you're putting or building these skyscrapers on this map by playing cards. Now all these cards will show is whereabouts in these, I think it's like 6 different cities, you can place your skyscrapers. But the orientation is important because every player is kind of situated on a different side of the board, and the cards will show where you can go in relation to where you're sitting. So even though a card might say, or might mean one thing for me, it might mean something else for somebody else, simply because of where they're sitting. And all you're doing is you're trying to get the majority in these different cities. You're trying to get the highest skyscraper. You are trying to just get points by having pure coverage, etc. So very minimalistic, straightforward scoring here. But there is some interesting decisions, particularly with how you manage your different buildings, because they do come in different heights. And in order to trump somebody else, because you can actually build on top of other people's pieces, you have to at least have the same quantity or the same kind of stories of buildings there. So there can be a bit of back and forth. It can be a little bit take-thatty and can get a little bit, get a little bit feisty at times, but it's all done in good spirit, and it feels like a real throwback, actually a nice bridge between older games and newer designs as well, because I think this does hold up remarkably well despite being released originally back in 1994. So nearly 30 years old, this game. So actually, the more I'm playing this one, the more I like it. Very easy to get to the table and a good introduction to area majority and area control games. So that is Manhattan at number 3. At number 2, I have Abluxon, also known as Linko. Now this is a card shedding game by Kramer and Kiesling, and all you're trying to do in this game is you're trying to get rid of all your cards, because every card played is going to be worth a point at the end of the game, and every card you have remaining in your hand by the time somebody has got rid of their cards is going to be worth negative points. And what you can do in this game is you can play as many cards of an identical number as you like. Of course, if you have a bunch of 8s, so you had 5 8s, that's 5 8s down, that's 5 cards done and 5 points essentially. But if you have the same quantity of cards as another player's just played, but the number is higher, you can actually choose to pick up their cards and add them to your hand with the idea of hopefully building bigger sets in the future, or you can simply force your opponent to pick them back up, or even kind of use a common pool to refill their hand. And that can actually create some good back and forth, because I might have, say, 3 2s in my hand. My opponent might have 2 2s down there. I'll play 2 3s, pick up his 2 2s, and all of a sudden I have 5 2s. And that's how it kind of works. It does build up and build up until you can have these huge displays of cards and hopefully catch your opponent off guard and force them to lose a lot of points at the end. Now I tend to like these breezy card games with a little bit of cleverness to them, and this one fits that category really well. And if you tend to like games like Scout, which is one that blew up recently, this is one that I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy because there is some shared DNA between the two, despite the two being different enough to warrant having both. So that is Abluxon or Linko at number 2. And finally, my favourite game of the bunch, at number 1, I have Jerusalem Anno Domini. So this is a brand new game, so we're going from old games right to the newest of the new here. And this is a pretty heavy Euro game by De Vere, all about trying to sit next to Jesus and his disciples or apostles during the Last Supper. So a very cool and fresh theme here, at least I think it was. And what you're doing is you're managing a hand of cards which have actions on them. It has a kind of a top action which will show which resources you'll harness each time, or even give you more kind of ability to shift things from your personal player board onto the main map, which gives you more capacity to store resources. And then you'll have the follow-up actions, which will be kind of collecting resources. It could be sending people off to the Last Supper and trying to score area control bonuses, or even just bonus actions. You're collecting these kind of parable tiles, which will score you points on set collection. Tons of different things you can do here. You know, the symbology at first is a little bit overwhelming, but there are some great player aids. And it doesn't take too long for things to start digesting and things to start making sense. But the decisions here are crunchy. There's some good pre-planning, good resource management, good hand management, a nice ramping up effect and competition for those end game points. And it's just a pretty nice blend of mechanisms here. So I'm not going to go too much into detail because I am going to, of course, review this, and it might even be out by the time this video is released. But I was actually very impressed with this one. I wasn't really aware of it coming out, and I just thought I saw it being released on KIENDA, so I thought I'd give it a look. And it seemed like the early feedback was good. I tend to like stuff that Devere puts out, or at least find it somewhat interesting. And that concept, the actual setting, I thought was, you know, something different and fresh. So I'm so happy to say that the gameplay itself was rock solid as well. And for me, this did actually have a lot of similarities to Lacrimosa, which was also released by Devere not too long ago. But I think this game is better than Lacrimosa in almost every category, despite, you know, having a lot of similarities in terms of the area control and the hand management, and tying those kind of things together with the card play and the actual board state. But yeah, I'm actually quite excited to show this game to you. Way better than I thought it was going to be. I think everybody enjoyed it. Different ways to get points, good competition, turn angst, racing to get to things. Lots of goodness here. So if you like your Euro games, then this is a good one. And it also has some really cool wrinkles in terms of the order you play cards, because you can get some nice swings of points for doing that, which I'm not going to go into too much detail, otherwise I'll be explaining the whole game. But all you need to know is the game is very good, and I'll be massively surprised if this doesn't make my top 10 of 2023. That's how much I thought of it. So that is Jerusalem Anno Domini at number 1. So there we have it. Those are the 10 games for this video. A big swing of games here. The bottom half is pretty random and not normally the kind of games I talk about, but these are not games that I personally bought, and games that my brother or my friends had bought, and therefore I played them just by, you know, passively. But hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.